name is John Pratt and I'm the senior partner at Hamilton Pratt. We're Europe's largest franchise law firm, and PGH Beegone asked us to prepare their franchise agreement. They've also asked us to present a video in order to try to simplify and take the stress and anxiety out of entering into their franchise agreement. What we've tried to do is to think about the sort of questions that you're likely to ask and have a go at answering them. I promise that this short video will not be the most interesting video you have ever watched, but I hope at the end of it you'll recognise that it contains some very helpful advice and that it will simplify the process for you. The way we've done it is to split the sort of questions that franchisees or prospective franchisees very often ask into 4 different sections. First of all, we'll look at the issues that arise on pre-signing the franchise agreement, so in the period up to signing. We'll then look at the franchise agreement itself and some issues around the franchise agreement. Then in the 3rd section, we look at how the franchise agreement has to be signed, or as lawyers say, executed. It sounds painful, it isn't. And then we'll look at some of the terms in the franchise agreement which are likely to arouse your concern or suspicion or wanting to know how those terms apply. So that's the plan. So we're going to address questions in each of those sections. So turning first to the pre-signing phase. First question is, why have a franchise agreement? Why have an agreement? You know, you're getting on really well with PGH. They're all really nice people. They've told you a load of stuff. Everything seems to be fine. So why an agreement? Well, the problem is at the root of the relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee, it's a legal relationship. Now, whilst that's at the root of the relationship, it should never ever be the paramount concern of the parties. There is that franchise agreement in the background, and it's really important that the franchise agreement sets out in as much detail as possible what that relationship really means in practice. Now, the bad news is that franchise agreements are very complex commercial agreements, and they're very lengthy. The average, and your agreement is the same, 40 to 50 pages. In fact, I've seen one franchise agreement that was about 150 pages long. So it's a complex agreement. And even worse news is that it's extremely one-sided in favour of the franchisor. But that isn't bad news, because remember that the franchisor is giving you the brand to use and the know-how that the franchisor's developed to use. So obviously the franchisor wants to know you're not going to do bad things with it. And that's why the agreement is so detailed. But in addition, remember what franchising is about. What franchising is about is a franchisor telling you, if you follow the system, you will succeed. So the purpose of the franchise agreement is really to make sure that when you sign the agreement, you follow the system. And it's also there to protect you as a franchisee, because you're going to invest your time and money into this franchise and you're going to be brilliant, I am sure. But what you don't want to happen is another franchisee who isn't brilliant and is doing bad things and perhaps goes into the press and people, say negative things about PGH Beegone. So it's there as much to protect you as the franchisor, because the franchisor will use the agreement to make sure that franchisees don't use bad things. Bear in mind also, there's the franchise agreement, but there is also the operations manual. The operations manual is a living document which the franchisor can change during the term of the franchise, but deals only with operational day-to-day issues. the franchise agreement deals with the big important issues. And during this process of discussing things with PGH Beegone, you will form a view of the franchisor and the people you're dealing with. And that's really important because, as I said, the franchise agreement, very detailed, very one-sided in favour of the franchisor. So you want to make sure from your dealings with the franchisor that this is a business that you can trust to actually enforce the provisions of the franchise agreement in a fair way. So next question, because PGH Beegone will tell you to have the agreement checked by a lawyer, is why? Well, it's partly for the franchisor's protection. The franchisor wants to know that you've understood all of your obligations and also wants to make sure that you don't say, well, I never really realised what I was going to sign up to. So you need somebody to tell you exactly what it is that the franchise agreement requires you to do. It's also for your protection. Because as part of the process of having the franchise agreement checked out, you will ask your lawyer to let you know something about the person who drafted it. Are they well known in franchising? And if they're not well known, that should make you a bit suspicious, because you can download really awful franchise agreements from the internet, for a couple of £100. And they never work. And if your franchisor has done that, that ought to make you very suspicious. I'm delighted to say PGH Beegone has not done that. It's gone to a great deal of expense. I'm sorry, PGH Beegone, in asking us to prepare this franchise agreement. And we are extremely well known and considered to be the best franchise lawyers in the UK. So that tells you a lot about the care that PGH have gone to in asking us to draft the franchise agreement. Now, franchisors like PGH Beegone will not change the franchise agreement, okay? And it's fundamental in franchising that all franchisees are on the same terms, because it's an administrative nightmare if franchisees are on different terms, and why should one franchisee get better terms than others, and so on. So the agreement won't be changed, but nevertheless you need to be told what the agreement means. And what you should ask your lawyer to do is to point out if there are any unfair provisions in the agreement, any unusual provisions in the agreement, or any provisions that don't work. What you should absolutely not ask your lawyer to do, and you should make it clear to your lawyer you don't want him or her to do it, is to amend the agreement, because that's a waste of everybody's time. The franchisor won't accept amendments. So next question, who are you going to get to review your franchise agreement? Well, absolutely don't, 100% don't get the lawyer who did your house purchase or did your divorce to do the franchise agreement review. They will be hopeless. Get a lawyer who really knows about franchising. Now, one of the problems you're going to face is that pretty much all commercial law firms will say, oh yeah, we know about franchising. Almost certainly they don't. There's only very few lawyers that do a lot of franchising, and they are listed on the British Franchise Association, the BFA's website. So get a list of those lawyers and ask them loads of questions to make sure that they are right for you. So number one, ask them how much it's going to cost, and it has to be a fixed fee. Never ever, I shouldn't be saying this, I'm a lawyer. Well, I should be saying this as a lawyer. Never ever use a lawyer without knowing how much it's going to cost, and it's got to be a fixed fee. And you would expect a cost of £500, £600, £700 to prepare a report. You need to ask the lawyer, who ought to be affiliated to the British Franchise Association, Will you do it, or will you pass it down to a junior? Because you don't want that. You want the actual lawyer with all the knowledge of franchising to prepare the report. What do you get for your money? So you need to establish exactly what the report's going to be. Is it going to be a 2-page report, or is it going to be a much more detailed report? And lastly, is the report simply going to address those unusual, unworkable, unfair provisions that we pointed out in the previous question? And if so, you go with that lawyer. It may be that PGH Beegone will at some stage work with a lawyer to review agreements for franchisees. Don't worry about that. If they do recommend lawyers, you don't have to use that lawyer, and the lawyer that is recommended will always have your interests and not PGH Beegone's interests at heart. So, next question. Let's move on to your queries. I know you will think, oh my God, I cannot face reading this 45-page franchise agreement. Please have a go. Please have a go at trying to understand what's in there. And if there is something in there that you don't understand, say so. Never ever be worried about saying, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense. Can you explain this? Okay. That's your right. It's too important entering into a franchise agreement for you not to do that. And never be concerned if it's a stupid question. Let me tell you, loads of franchisees have said to me, this is a stupid question, and it never is. So just ask away. Once you've got your questions, after going through the franchise agreement, you get your lawyer to review it, and then you pick the most important queries for PGH to address. Do not submit 50, 60 questions. That is a nightmare. And PGH, like any good franchisor, will say, no, that's too many. So pick the 5 or 10 most important issues, and PGH will have a go at answering those questions. And again, how PGH answer those questions will tell you a lot about them and how they do business. So you'll be able to form that view and whether you can trust them. Now, the parties to the franchise agreement will depend on your legal structure. You have a choice whether to operate as what's called a sole trader. So if I was to take a franchise agreement, it would be as a sole trader, it would be John Pratt. And I would enter into the agreement, and I would be personally liable to the franchisor if I did bad things under the agreement. I could create a partnership with some other people, my wife or friends, and then each of us would be personally liable. Alternatively, I could create a limited company. So I become a shareholder. And in that scenario, you'd have to be a shareholder and a director, but you would have to give PGH Beegone a personal guarantee to put you in exactly the same position you would have been in if you'd operated as a sole trader or as a partnership. And that guarantee is set out in Schedule 1 of the agreement. So in the PGH Beegone agreement, there's the franchisor, PGH Beegone, there's the franchisee, the limited company if you operate as a limited company. There are the owners, because PGH wants to know who owns your business, and they're listed in the schedule to the agreement. And then there is the principals, and the principals are the owners who give the personal guarantee set out in Schedule 1. Sounds terribly complicated. It really isn't, but that's the process in terms of franchising. So what do you do before signing the franchise agreement? Well, number one, make sure that you really want to go ahead. Make sure you've got the family support. Make sure you've got that get up and go to make a success of your business. Because remember, it is your business. You're not an employee, so perhaps holidays and relaxation and all those sort of things you have to put behind you whilst your business is being built up. And you do need to ask yourself, are you up for that? Secondly, have you got the financing in place to take the franchise and to do whatever is required to build up your business and to have sufficient working capital in the early days? Make sure that all of the questions and queries you had and your lawyer had have been properly answered. And then lastly, back to this trust bit, do you trust PGH Beegone to treat you fairly and enforce the agreement in a fair way? If you can tick all of those, we're on to the next phase, which is the franchise agreement. We have tried, you might think not entirely successfully, but we have tried to make the franchise agreement understandable. So we haven't used legal language, herein before, herein after, all the sort of arcane and stupid language that lawyers very often use. We've tried to write it in plain English. Now, there will inevitably be some bits that you don't understand. And in relation to this agreement, there's a reference to premises, which is the address that will either be your home or your office, depending on what type of franchise you take. Even if you operate through a vehicle, there will be a definition of premises, which is likely to be your home, where the vehicle will be kept and items, no doubt, stored. We haven't been entirely successful in not using legal language, because in clause 16, which deals with termination, we use the term loss of bargain, damages. And that term is very well known to lawyers and means that if PGH Beegone terminates your franchise agreement for your breach, which is set out in clause 16, then they would be entitled to make a claim for the money they would have earned had you not been in breach. And that's called loss of bargain damages. So that's the franchise agreement. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions, and your lawyers might, again, limit them to a sensible number. So we're now into the third phase, which is signing the agreement. And one of the questions that's very often asked, do you actually have to sign the agreement, do a wet ink signature? Most franchisors still require that. And now that's been quite challenging during the last couple of years with COVID. And so more and more are thinking about electronic signatures. And unfortunately, the law is lagging behind on that. And there isn't a clear answer of the extent to which electronic signatures are allowed. But we believe that you can use electronic signatures on franchise agreements by using DocuSign or one of those entities. More difficult is if the document is a deed, and the guarantee in Schedule 1, if you're a limited company, it is a deed. And there, again, you can sign it. It would need two directors to sign the deed, but the witness would actually have to be present to make it valid. So it gets complicated. Much easiest is not to do it electronically, although you can. The date of the agreement is put on right at the end. So when the final signature and everybody's checked, it's all been done properly, the date is put on. So we're now moving to the last phase, which is you've entered into the agreement. What are the issues? So the first question, which is frequently asked, is, can I sell or transfer my business? The answer is yes, you can. It's clause 14 of the PGH Beegone franchise agreement, and it sets out the process for selling or transfer. Because bear in mind that the franchisor does not want you to transfer your business to somebody who they wouldn't want as a franchisee in the network. That's protecting the network, protecting other other franchisees. So PGH have got the right to approve a purchaser of your business, and therefore clause 14 envisages that you will seek permission to a transfer, and it sets out the process and procedure for transferring, selling a business, which you will be required to follow, and which of course is being developed because PGH have not got to the stage, obviously, where franchisees actually want to sell or transfer. The process involves some payments. First of all, a payment of £750 to PGH for checking out your purchaser, making sure he's the sort of person they want in the system. Secondly, the purchaser is going to have to be trained, and some information and so on is going to have to be provided by PGH. And so there's a payment of 50% of the then current initial fee, which your purchaser will have to pay. And then there's an additional payment, either 5% of the sale price or 10% if PGH have introduced the purchaser of the sale price. And there's also an option in favour of PGH to match any offer that you receive. So the next question that frequently arises is performance standards. In clause 16.4 of your franchise agreement, there's a requirement that you comply with the franchisor's performance standards, which deal not only with operational things, but also financial requirements, how you grow your business, and so on. And that's really important because remember, you're being granted an exclusive territory. So what they don't want is that you get very comfortable with the money you're earning and say to yourself, oh, I think I'll play golf 2 days a week because I'm perfectly happy with the money I'm receiving from this business. It's in the franchisor's interest and the system's interest that you continue to grow your business. So there will be financial obligations. Now, we haven't set out in the agreement what those performance standards are, because they can vary from year to year. They could be how quickly you answer the phone, how clean your uniform is, how regularly you service your vehicle, and so on. So there is flexibility there. And what the performance standards clause envisages is if you fail to meet those performance standards, the franchisor or PGH can put in a process to get you to correct what you're doing, and you will have to pay PGH's costs in doing that. And if at the end of that process you're still not doing it right, then PGH can require you to sell your business. So it's not a termination like in lots of franchise agreements. It's a requirement that you sell your business. So you will get the money, some money for your business. You don't lose everything at that stage. The next question we're often asked is, will the franchise agreement change? Well, it will not change during the term of your franchise agreement. Okay? Once you sign that franchise agreement, the terms set out in the agreement will continue to apply. That could change on renewal. And in fact, it's likely to change on renewal, because on a renewal, and we'll come on to renewal, PGH can require you to sign the then current franchise agreement, which, as I said, could change. And bear in mind that the operational issues, which are in the operations manual, could change. But the agreement itself during the term will not change. So, what happens on the expiry of your first term? Well, clause 15 deals with this. No, it doesn't. That's my next question. So you have a choice on the expiry of your initial term to do three things. You can either let the agreement terminate, you can renew the agreement, providing you've met the conditions, or you can sell your business if you want to do something different. Now, generally, you would not allow your agreement to terminate because you've paid for your investment, and if it's profitable business, it has a value. And what you can't do at the end of the initial term is operate independently. There's loads of stuff in the agreement that would prevent you from doing that. So if you wanted to carry on a similar business, you would have to renew, and you would have to enter into the franchisor's then standard franchise agreement. And in the next question, and it will be the final question, you'll be pleased to hear, I set out what happens on the renewal process. The alternative to renewal is to sell. Find a purchaser and sell your business. So, if you want to renew, this is clause 15 this time, you have to comply with clause 15. So you would have to have been in compliance with the franchise agreement. The franchisor is not going to renew a franchisee that's done a load of bad things. So you'd have to have performed to the requirements of the franchisor, and you will have not been in breach of the franchise agreement, and there are other conditions attached to renewal, including an obligation on you to serve notice on the franchisor between 6 and 9 months before the end of the term. Make a note of that, because you should not necessarily expect the franchisor to remind you. And we have put, because of the importance of notifying the franchisor in a timely fashion, a provision that says time is of the essence. So if you miss that 6 to 9 months window by even a day, the franchisor would not be obliged to renew. So really important you make a note of that. You are entitled, providing PGH is still franchising, to 2 renewals subject to the conditions set out, and there is a payment of £1,000 to cover, up to 1,000 rather, to cover PGH's costs. So those are the questions that we frequently come up against. We've described the process, which I hope, and it's certainly PGH's hope, that it's simplified and taken a lot of the anxiety out of that process. PGH are determined to support you both in terms of the duration of the franchise agreement and in the process building up to you signing the agreement. And all I can say on behalf of PGH is we hope very much you sign the franchise. Welcome to the PGH family. It will be a great success with your drive and determination and your compliance with the system. Thank you very much for listening to this. As I warned you, this was as much fun as root canal work at the dentist, but I hope we've addressed a number of your issues. Thank you very much.